What happens when a cold, untouchable CEO is forced to share a tiny motel room with a struggling single mom? During the worst storm of his life, he swore he didn't need anyone, until her little boy's life was in his hands. And in the pouring rain, everything changed forever. You won't believe how this night ends. Stay with us because this story will break your heart and heal it. If this story moved you, don't just watch. Be part of our community. Hit that subscribe button now so you never miss a powerful story like this. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. What would you have done in that storm? And if this touched your heart, share this video with your friends and family to spread the inspiration. Let's keep these stories alive together. The roar of the engines cut through the tense silence as Flight 279 pushed through layers of thick, black clouds. Rain hammered the windows like 1,000 angry fists. Inside the first-class cabin, Nathan Cole sat rigid, his jaw tight, fingers gripping his phone as he jabbed at the screen again and again. No signal. His sharp blue eyes darted to the flight map, glowing faintly on the seatback screen. He hated delays. Time was money. And right now, both were slipping through his hands. A sudden jolt rattled the cabin, coffee splashed across tray tables, and a baby cried somewhere in the back. A nervous voice crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, due to a Category 5 storm in our flight path, we are diverting. We'll be making an emergency landing at the nearest available airport in Alabama. Please remain calm." Nathan's fist clenched. "Unbelievable," he muttered, snatching his phone, dialing his assistant. Static. Deadline. He tried again, pressing harder, as if force could break through the storm. Nothing. His breathing quickened. Not out of fear, but out of raw, boiling frustration. 24 rows back, Grace Miller sat with her knees pressed tight against her backpack, arms wrapped around it as though holding onto a lifeline. Her knuckles turned white. She forced a smile toward the elderly man beside her, but her lips trembled. Her phone shook in her hand as she tapped a single contact. Mrs. Carter, her neighbor. The signal stuttered, and then she heard her son's small voice faint through the line. "Mommy?" Grace bit down hard on her lip, tears threatening. "Liam, listen to me. Mommy will be back, I promise. Stay with Mrs. Carter. I love you." The plane shuddered violently. A tray of drinks crashed to the floor with a metallic clatter. Gasps and muffled cries spread through the cabin. Oxygen masks jostled in their compartments, but didn't drop. Grace tightened her grip on the armrest, whispering to herself, "Stay calm for Liam." Nathan slammed his phone down, glaring at the ceiling as if it had personally betrayed him. He adjusted his cufflinks, then his jaw hardened. Around him, first-class passengers exchanged anxious looks, but he ignored them, pulling out his leather briefcase and flipping open his laptop as though sheer willpower could keep his world from collapsing. Lightning lit up the windows with a flash so bright the entire cabin froze for a heartbeat. Thunder rolled, shaking the fuselage. The seatbelt sign chimed again, sharp and urgent. "This is your captain. We are preparing for an immediate landing. Please remain seated and keep your seatbelts fastened." Nathan's grip on the armrest tightened until his knuckles turned pale. He hated being trapped, hated not being in control. He stared straight ahead, willing the storm to bend to his schedule. Grace's phone cut out mid-sentence. Her breath hitched. She shoved it back into her backpack, wrapped her arms around herself, and closed her eyes for a single desperate prayer. "Please, just let me get back to him." The plane began its descent. Wind slammed against the fuselage, a deep growl echoing through the metal shell. Passengers clung to armrests. A child screamed. Grace whispered Liam's name over and over like a mantra. Nathan closed his eyes, jaw rigid, trying to drown out the chaos. The wheels screeched against the wet tarmac with a bone-jarring impact. The cabin lurched forward, people cried out, luggage tumbled from overhead bins. A smell of burned rubber filled the air. Nathan grabbed the seat in front of him, teeth clenched. Grace's head jerked forward, her shoulder slamming the window wall. But she stayed upright, panting. Then, silence, except for the relentless drumming of rain on metal. The engines wound down, and the plane coasted to a trembling stop. For a moment, no one moved. Then passengers broke into frantic whispers, shaky laughter, and muffled sobs. Nathan yanked his phone up again. No service. His suit jacket clung damp to his shoulders from the humidity, but his expression stayed cold, razor sharp. He had survived, but time was bleeding out fast. Grace pressed her forehead to the cool glass, tears streaming down her cheeks in relief. "I'm alive. I'll get back to Liam." Her hands shook as she unclipped her seatbelt, the buckle rattling loud in the tense cabin. A flight attendant's voice finally broke the air. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Gulfport Regional. Due to the storm, all connecting flights are canceled until further notice. Please follow instructions and seek shelter." Nathan's eyes narrowed. "Unacceptable," he muttered, already unbuckling, already on his feet, ready to fight the storm and anything in his way. Grace gripped her backpack and stood too, her legs trembling, but her will unbroken. She whispered to herself again, "I have to get back to my boy." Outside the window, lightning forked across the black sky, illuminating the flooded tarmac. Two strangers, in two different worlds, now trapped by the same storm, unaware that before the night was over, their paths would collide in a way that would change everything. The moment Nathan stepped off the plane, the storm hit him like a wall. The rain was relentless, soaking through his suit jacket within seconds. The airport terminal behind him was packed with stranded passengers arguing with attendants. But he didn't stop. He shoved his phone into his pocket, lowered his head, and pushed forward into the roaring wind. The sidewalk outside was half submerged. Water sloshed over his polished shoes with every stride. His jaw clenched tighter with each step. He refused to waste a single hour waiting around. Grace clutched the straps of her worn backpack as she darted out behind a group of passengers. The icy rain stung her face, her thin jacket instantly drenched. Every instinct screamed at her to turn back, but Liam's face burned in her mind like a beacon. She ran past the flickering streetlight, dodged a stalled taxi half submerged in water, and followed the same direction the airport worker had pointed. Nathan moved with quick, purposeful steps, shoulders squared against the wind, ignoring the puddles that splashed up against his legs. The storm's roar swallowed every sound except the hammering of his own heart. The power lines above swayed violently. Ahead, the neon sign of Pinewood Motel glowed weakly through sheets of rain. Grace gasped for air as she caught sight of the same sign. Her sneakers slapped against the pavement, water spraying with each step. Her chest ached, but she pushed harder, her mind repeating like a drumbeat. Find a room. Stay alive. Get back to Liam. Nathan grabbed the motel door handle and yanked it open with a wet jerk, only to freeze for half a second when Grace stumbled in right behind him. They stood dripping in the narrow entryway, water pooling beneath their feet. For the first time, their eyes met. His were piercing and furious, hers wide and exhausted, but unwavering. The front desk clerk, a frazzled woman with a messy ponytail, looked up from her computer. Her hands trembled as thunder cracked overhead, making the windows rattle. "I'm sorry," she stammered, eyes darting between the two soaked strangers. We only have one room left. Double bed. That's it." Nathan's voice cut like ice. "No. Find another." His tone was sharp, commanding, as though he was used to the world rearranging itself to his will. Grace's jaw dropped. "Excuse me," she said, brushing wet hair from her face. "Did you hear her? That's the last room. You want to sleep out there?" Nathan's eyes narrowed, his voice dropping lower, more dangerous. "I don't share rooms." Grace squared her shoulders, her voice rising despite the storm outside. "Neither do I, but I'm not dying out there just to make you comfortable." The room went silent, except for the drumming rain and the rattling windows. Another clap of thunder split the air, the lights flickered, and the clerk flinched. Nathan's hand twitched toward his wallet. He was seconds from snapping, from walking back out into the storm just to prove a point. But one glance out the glass door changed his mind. The wind had intensified, bending trees and tearing at signs. He cursed under his breath. No choice. He slapped his black credit card onto the counter. "Fine, give me the key." Grace crossed her arms, still shivering, but the smallest flicker of relief crossed her face. She didn't thank him. Instead, she grabbed the key the clerk slid across the counter and muttered, "I'm taking the side near the window." Nathan shot her a glare, grabbed his suitcase handle, and strode down the dim hallway without waiting. The old carpet squelched beneath their wet shoes. Grace followed, dripping water with each step, gripping the backpack as if it held her entire world. When they reached room 7, Nathan pushed the door open hard enough that it banged against the wall. The single lamp inside flickered, casting long shadows over a double bed, covered with a threadbare blanket and a rickety nightstand. The air smelled faintly of damp wood and old cleaning supplies. Nathan dropped his suitcase by the door and turned sharply, his tone clipped. "Stay out of my way." Grace threw her backpack into the far corner, lifted her chin, and shot back, "You stay out of mine." Outside, the storm roared louder, slamming against the motel walls as though determined to get in. Inside, two strangers stood facing each other, wet, exhausted, unwilling to back down. Trapped together in a room neither wanted, unaware that this forced night under one roof was only the beginning of something that would tear down every wall they'd built. The door slammed shut behind them, the echo swallowed by the storm's howl outside. Nathan dropped his soaked jacket onto the chair, shaking rain from his hair, and yanked at the buttons on his shirt cuff with sharp, impatient movements. His suitcase was open within seconds, laptop case shoved aside, as if he could outwork the chaos battering the motel walls. The weak ceiling light flickered again, shadows darting across his face. Grace kept to her corner, peeling her dripping backpack from her shoulders. Water spattered onto the old linoleum floor as she dug out her phone with shaking hands. No signal. Her lips pressed into a thin line. She tried again, turning toward the window, hoping for a single bar. Lightning flashed, illuminating her tired face and damp strands of hair sticking to her cheek. The call dropped before it could even ring. Her chest tightened. "Please, let Liam be okay." Nathan snapped the laptop open, fingers hovering over the keyboard, pretending not to notice her panic. But he noticed. He noticed everything. Her shaky breath, the way her shoulders sagged. He shoved the thought aside, focusing on the useless screen in front of him. The storm struck again with a deafening crash of thunder. The light stuttered, blinked, and went out. Darkness swallowed the room whole. Grace gasped, stumbling back from the window. Her hip caught the corner of the rickety table, sending a glass of motel water toppling. The splash was loud in the dark. "Damn it!" Nathan's voice shot through the pitch-black room, followed by the scrape of his chair. He lunged toward the sound, and then it hit him. A cold rush soaking into his socks, pooling around his Italian leather shoes lying beside the bed. "Are you kidding me?" His voice rose, sharp and furious. "Do you have any idea how much these shoes cost?" Grace froze for half a second, her hand still on the edge of the table. Then she let out a short laugh, half disbelief, half defiance. "Water's free," she shot back, her tone cutting, laced with sarcasm. "You'll live." The air in the room shifted, thick with tension. Nathan's breath came out in a sharp exhale, a muscle twitching in his jaw. No one spoke over him like that. No one dared. He stepped forward until she could feel the heat radiating from him in the dark. "Excuse me." His voice was low now, dangerous. Grace didn't back away. She straightened, fists clenched at her sides, heart pounding against her ribs. "You think you're the only one with problems?" she whispered, anger cracking her voice. "I'm stuck here too. I have a 6-year-old at home, scared and alone, and you're crying over shoes?" The words hit him like a punch. He opened his mouth to fire back, but nothing came. For the first time in years, he didn't have a ready weapon in his arsenal of cold comebacks. Instead, silence filled the room, broken only by the wind rattling the window. A sudden flash of lightning lit up her face, wet hair clinging to her temples, eyes blazing with a mix of fear and fury. Nathan saw her, really saw her, and his throat tightened before he could stop it. He turned away, grabbing his jacket, wiping at the drenched shoes with quick, angry movements, as if scrubbing out emotions he didn't want to feel. Grace sank onto the edge of the bed, her shoulders trembling, half from the cold, half from the storm of emotions she kept locked inside. She swiped at her face, furious at herself for even caring what this arrogant stranger thought. But she couldn't stop shaking, couldn't stop hearing Liam's voice in her head, asking when she'd be home. Another boom of thunder, closer this time. The window shook so hard she flinched, hands flying to her ears. Nathan looked up sharply. For a heartbeat, their eyes met in the faint glow of lightning outside. Neither spoke. The fight between them hung in the air, raw and electric. But beneath it, something else stirred. An unexpected flicker neither of them could name. The storm outside didn't let up. But inside, for the first time, neither of them knew if the danger was from the rain pounding the roof, or from the walls they had both built, now starting to crack. The storm outside hadn't calmed, but the shouting inside had faded into a heavy silence. The motel room smelled faintly of damp wood and rain-soaked clothes. Grace shifted on the edge of the bed, arms wrapped tight around her knees, while Nathan paced once across the dark room, then stopped when he caught sight of the small emergency candle the clerk had handed them earlier. He grabbed a match from the bedside drawer, struck it with a sharp flick, and cupped his hand around the tiny flame. The wick caught, a faint orange glow spilling across the cracked walls and frayed blanket. The tension between them didn't vanish, but the darkness loosened its grip just enough to reveal the exhaustion on both their faces. Grace stared at the candle for a long beat, then exhaled slowly, her voice quiet but trembling. "He's 6, she whispered. "My son, Liam. He loves drawing. Superheroes, dragons, anything he can dream up. He's why I keep going, no matter how tired I am." Nathan didn't answer. He stood still, staring at the flame as if hypnotized. But inside, the words hit him like lightning striking dry earth. His chest tightened, memories clawing their way back. A little boy's laugh echoing down a hallway, tiny fingers gripping his hand, a flash of headlights on a rainy night. He blinked hard, jaw clenching, but the images wouldn't stop. Grace looked up, her eyes catching the faint shimmer in his. She hesitated, but something about the way he kept his back so rigid made her push on. "I know you don't care," she said softly, almost to herself. "But I had to leave him with my neighbor just to take this job. And now I'm stuck here while he's home wondering if I'm okay." Her voice cracked on the last word, and she turned her face away, embarrassed by the tears threatening to fall. Nathan's hand twitched by his side. He wanted to shut it out, to stay silent behind his armor. But the crack in his own walls widened. He drew in a breath, deep and unsteady, and finally spoke, his voice low, raw and uneven. "I had a boy too." Grace froze. Her eyes darted back to him. He wasn't looking at her, just staring down at the floor, the candlelight tracing the hard lines of his face. Nathan's throat worked, the words scraping out like they'd been locked away for years. His name was Michael. He was 6, loved toy planes, anything that moved fast. But his voice broke, and he looked away sharply, pressing the heel of his hand against his eyes. "I couldn't protect him." The room seemed to shrink around them. Grace's heart lurched in her chest. She wanted to say something, anything, but no words came. Instead, she slowly set her feet on the floor and rose, her knees trembling as she stepped closer to him. Nathan turned his head slightly, enough to catch her expression in the flickering light. No pity, just quiet understanding. His breath shuddered out. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like a CEO or a man in control. He felt human, broken. Grace's hands clenched and unclenched at her sides, fighting the urge to reach out. Instead, she spoke, voice steady despite the lump in her throat. I'm sorry." Nathan didn't move. His shoulders rose and fell with a slow, ragged breath. "Don't be," he muttered. But the harshness was gone, replaced by something softer, something buried under years of cold walls. They stood there in the dim light, the storm outside still roaring, the rain battering the motel roof. But inside, the distance between them shrank, something fragile and unexpected weaving through the air. Grace lowered her gaze, a tear sliding down her cheek before she could stop it. Nathan saw it, and for once, didn't look away. The candle flame flickered, casting long shadows over two strangers who, in that small moment, were no longer just strangers. Their defenses had cracked, just enough for the pain to spill out, and just enough for the first flicker of something new to spark in the dark. The morning sun burned hot over the construction site in southern Florida, the kind of humid heat that clung to your skin no matter how many times you wiped your brow. Nathan Cole stepped out of his black SUV, his polished shoes crunching on gravel as he strode toward the makeshift office trailer. A month had passed since that stormy night in the motel, but the memory of Grace Miller, her trembling voice, her tear that caught the candlelight, had lodged itself in his mind like a splinter he couldn't remove. He had buried himself in work, launching a low-income housing project in this coastal town, pretending none of it mattered. But as he pushed open the flimsy door, the air-conditioned office buzzing with the sound of printers and clacking keyboards, he froze. Grace was there. She stood at a cluttered table near the back, hair pulled into a loose bun, her white blouse wrinkled from a long shift, sleeves rolled up past her elbows. Her eyes were down, focused on sorting expense reports into neat piles, her hands moving quickly, though her shoulders drooped with exhaustion. A single pencil stuck awkwardly in her bun. She didn't look up at first, until the door clicked shut behind him. Nathan's heart jerked. For a moment, the room dissolved. He saw only her, bathed in sunlight slicing through the dusty blinds. His breath caught. It's her. Grace finally sensed the stillness. She straightened, turned, and the color drained from her face. Her lips parted, but no words came. Her eyes widened, recognition flashing, then confusion, then something harder, walls snapping back up. She turned back to her papers as if nothing had happened, but her fingers trembled against the folders. Nathan's jaw tightened. He forced himself to move, stepping farther inside, his presence drawing glances from the crew. The foreman stammered, "Mr. Cole, we didn't expect you today." "I don't announce inspections," Nathan cut in, his voice cool as ice, eyes never leaving Grace. A laugh broke the tension from the far side of the room. A tall, greasy-haired clerk leaned against a desk, arms crossed, smirking at Grace. "Hey, Miller," he drawled, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You look beat. Late night, huh? Or are you saving all that energy for me?" Grace froze, jaw clenching, but didn't lift her eyes. Her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. The clerk chuckled, taking a step closer. "Come on, don't look at me like that. I'm just saying, that's enough." Nathan's voice cut through the room like a blade. Every head snapped toward him. He hadn't moved from his spot near the door, but his gaze was locked on the clerk, blue eyes cold and lethal. The clerk laughed nervously, scratching the back of his neck. "Relax, boss. Just joking around." "One more word," Nathan said, his tone dropping to a dangerous low. "And you're out. Clean your desk, and don't come back." The room went dead silent. The clerk's smirk crumbled. "Sir, I don't repeat myself," Nathan snapped, and the clerk shrank back, mumbling something before grabbing his jacket and slipping out. Grace stood frozen, papers still in hand. Her heart pounded so hard she could barely hear over the blood rushing in her ears. She didn't know whether to thank him or be furious that he'd even witnessed this moment. Nathan turned his head slowly, his gaze landing on her again. The edge in his eyes softened, just a fraction. For the first time since that storm, he spoke directly to her, his voice quiet but steady. "Don't let people like that get to you." Grace blinked, caught off guard. She expected arrogance, a lecture, anything but that. She looked at him, really looked, and saw something she hadn't before: concern. Not pity, not ownership, just concern. For a moment, the buzzing printers and distant hammering outside faded away. They stood locked in a charged silence, the air between them thick with memories neither had asked for. Grace broke it first, her voice rough. "You didn't have to do that." Nathan's lips pressed into a thin line, but he didn't look away. "Yes," he said simply, "I did." Her breath hitched. She turned back to her desk quickly, pretending to refocus on the reports, but her hands shook too much to hold the papers steady. Behind her, Nathan's eyes lingered a second longer before he forced himself to look away. He strode toward the foreman, barking for updates, his clipped tone back in place. But inside, his pulse raced. Grace swallowed hard, trying to steady herself, but the truth gnawed at her. The man who'd once been nothing but cold arrogance had just stood up for her in front of an entire room. And as she stacked her folders, she couldn't stop the strange heat that spread through her chest. Confusion, gratitude, and something dangerously close to hope. Outside, the sound of hammers and drills picked up again. Inside, fate had shifted, drawing their paths closer, whether they wanted it or not. The afternoon heat pressed down on the construction site, but inside the small office trailer, the air was thick for a different reason. Grace barged through the door, her stack of papers spilling from her arms, her breathing sharp like she had just run a mile. Workers glanced up from their desks, startled by the sound, but she didn't care. Her eyes locked on Nathan, who was reviewing blueprints near the back wall. "Nathan Cole!" Her voice cracked through the room like a whip. He looked up slowly, one eyebrow raised, his usual calm mask already in place. "Grace," he said evenly, "is there a problem with the reports?" She slammed a letter onto the desk between them. Is this your signature?" Nathan's gaze flicked to the paper. He didn't answer right away, and that silence ignited her fury. "You went behind my back," Grace snapped, her voice rising. "You paid my rent? 3 months in advance?" Nathan closed the folder in his hands, straightened his posture, and met her glare. "I told you I don't like distractions on my sites. If you're worried about where you're sleeping, you're not focused here." Grace's hands trembled as she clutched the letter. Her eyes burned with tears she refused to let fall. "I don't need your charity. I didn't ask for your help." Nathan's jaw tightened. His own temper, buried under years of control, flared. "Charity?" His voice grew louder, cutting through the hum of the office. "You think I did this for charity? I'm trying to protect you." The words ricocheted through the room. Workers froze, heads turning, eyes wide. Grace stepped back a half step, stunned by his sudden shout. But the anger in her chest only swelled. "Protect me?" she shot back, voice shaking. "Or are you just running from yourself?" Nathan's breath hitched. Her words struck deeper than she could know. Memories of that stormy night in the motel flashed before him. Her voice in the dark, his confession about Michael. He felt the ground shift under him, old wounds ripping open. Grace's tears finally spilled over, streaking down her cheeks. "You show up, you act like you care, and then you try to fix me like I'm some problem you can throw money at. You don't get it, Nathan. You can't buy your way out of whatever you're hiding from." Hodge. He took a step forward, eyes blazing, then stopped cold. The words caught in his throat. His fists clenched at his sides, the blueprint crumpling in one hand. The entire office was silent, every worker frozen, no one daring to move. Nathan's voice dropped, low and rough. "You think you know me? You don't know a damn thing." Grace wiped at her cheeks with the back of her hand, her chest rising and falling as she tried to steady herself. "Then tell me," she whispered fiercely, "what are you so afraid of?" Nathan stared at her, the question hanging heavy in the air. His breath came fast, his mind a storm of images. Michael's laughter, the explosion of headlights, the crushing weight of failure he carried every day. But he couldn't say it. He couldn't let her see that far inside. Instead, he turned away. He grabbed his jacket off the chair, shoved the crumpled blueprint into his bag, and headed for the door without another word. His shoulders were stiff, his steps quick and heavy on the thin floor. "Nathan," Grace called after him, but he didn't stop. The door slammed behind him, the sound rattling the walls. The room stayed still, the tension crackling like static. Grace stood rooted to the spot, breathing hard, the letter still shaking in her hand. She wanted to chase him, to demand answers, but her knees buckled and she sank into the nearest chair, covering her face with her hands. Outside, Nathan strode across the gravel, the blazing sun no match for the storm raging inside him. His chest heaved, his jaw clenched so hard it ached. He didn't look back. He couldn't. Every step away from that office felt like tearing something out of himself. But he told himself it was better this way. Back inside, Grace dropped the letter to the floor, staring at it through blurred vision. Her heart thudded painfully against her ribs as she whispered to herself, "Why did I even let him in?" Neither of them knew it yet, but that rift, those words, would change everything. The walls between them had cracked wide open, but instead of reaching through, they were both walking away, each carrying wounds that wouldn't stop bleeding. And outside, the construction site buzzed on, oblivious to the quiet disaster unfolding within. Rain drizzled against the cracked windows of Grace's small apartment, the faint streetlight outside casting long streaks across the wet pavement. Inside, Liam's laughter from earlier that evening still seemed to hang in the air, until a sudden crash shattered everything. "Liam!" Grace's voice ripped through the night as she dropped the laundry basket in her hands and bolted out the door. Her heart slammed against her ribs when she saw him sprawled on the sidewalk. His small bike toppled in the gutter, wheels still spinning. A deep cut streaked across his forehead, crimson mixing with rainwater, sliding down to his cheek. His eyes fluttered open, confused, dazed. "Mom?" His voice was thin, barely audible over the patter of rain. Grace dropped to her knees on the soaked concrete, scooping him into her arms. "Stay with me, baby, stay with me." Her fingers trembled as she pressed her scarf against the bleeding wound. But the blood kept seeping through. She fumbled for her phone, her voice cracking as she called for a taxi. Static, a busy tone. Another attempt. No one answered. Her breath quickened. Panic clawed at her chest. She tried again, fingers slipping against the screen, until finally the phone rang. A voice answered, low and familiar. "Grace." She froze, the rain hammering around her, the scarf soaked in her hands. "Nathan?" Her voice broke. "What's wrong?" His tone was sharp now, urgent. "It's Liam," she gasped. He fell. He's bleeding. I can't get a taxi. Where are you?" His voice snapped to command, cutting through her panic. She rattled off her address, choking on sobs. "Stay there. 15 minutes." He hung up. Grace clutched Liam tighter, rocking him gently, whispering over and over, "You're okay, baby. You're okay." His small hand curled weakly against her jacket. Headlights cut through the rainy darkness sooner than she expected. Tires screeched against the slick pavement as a black SUV swung into the curb, splashing through puddles. The driver's door flew open, and Nathan stepped out, rain drenching his hair and jacket instantly. He didn't hesitate. "Give him to me." His voice was raw. He scooped Liam into his arms with surprising gentleness for a man whose hands built empires. Grace scrambled up, following as Nathan sprinted toward the SUV. He slid into the back seat with Liam cradled against him, barking at the driver. "Hospital, now!" And the engine roared to life, tires spinning as they shot down the flooded street. Grace sat beside them, holding her breath, clutching Liam's small hand as Nathan pressed a steady palm against the bandage, murmuring, "Stay with me, little guy. We're almost there." Red lights blurred past. The SUV swerved around slower cars. Nathan's jaw was tight, his hand never leaving Liam's head, brushing damp hair back from his face. Grace watched him, tears cutting down her cheeks, seeing not the cold CEO who had walked out of her life, but a man fighting like hell for her son. They burst through the hospital doors minutes later. Nathan carried Liam straight through the sliding entrance, his commanding tone cutting through the nurses' startled questions. "He needs a doctor. Now." Grace ran beside him as the nurses rushed forward, guiding them down a hallway. They laid Liam on a narrow bed, the fluorescent lights harsh and bright. Nathan stepped back only when the doctor intervened, his hands trembling as he clenched them into fists. Grace stood frozen at the foot of the bed, her breath shallow. Minutes felt like hours. The storm outside intensified, pounding the hospital windows. Grace wrapped her arms around herself, shivering despite the heat inside. Then a soft voice broke through the chaos. "He's stable," the doctor said gently. "A mild concussion and stitches, but he'll be fine." Relief hit Grace like a tidal wave. Her knees gave out, and she sank into the plastic chair beside the bed, covering her mouth to muffle her sobs. Nathan stood silently, staring at the boy asleep beneath the thin blanket. Slowly, he lowered himself into the chair on the other side. He leaned forward, brushing his fingers across Liam's hair, his voice low and unsteady as he whispered, "You're tough, kid. Stronger than most." Grace wiped her eyes, watching as Nathan picked up a children's book from the nightstand. His hand shook slightly as he opened it, but he cleared his throat and began to read. Once upon a time, there was a superhero who never gave up. Liam stirred, eyelids fluttering, a faint smile curving his lips. Nathan kept reading, his voice rough but steady, filling the room with words of courage and hope. Grace's heart clenched at the sight. This man who had built walls around himself was sitting here, breaking every one of them for her child. Tears streamed down her face, not from fear this time, but from something deeper: gratitude, awe, and a flicker of something she hadn't felt in years: hope. Outside, the rain continued to fall. But inside that small hospital room, the storm between them had shifted. Nathan kept reading, his hand resting protectively on Liam's shoulder, and Grace stood in the doorway, her heart pounding, knowing everything had just changed. The night air was thick with the scent of wet asphalt, the soft drizzle turning the streetlights into hazy halos. Grace stood by the window of her small apartment, arms crossed, staring at the steady rain. 2 weeks had passed since the hospital, 2 weeks of silence from Nathan. She told herself it was better that way, safer. But her chest ached every time she caught Liam tracing the stitches on his forehead and whispering, "Cool uncle saved me." A knock came, faint but urgent, pulling her from her thoughts. She pushed the curtain aside. A figure stood in the rain, shoulders broad, head bowed, water streaming off his dark coat. Her heartbeat quickened before she even touched the doorknob. When she stepped outside, the drizzle instantly soaked her hair and sweater. Nathan stood there, no umbrella, his hair plastered to his forehead, his breath visible in the cold air. He looked at her like a man ready to face a firing squad, then slowly dropped to his knees on the wet concrete. "Grace." His voice was raw, trembling as the rain pelted down. "I ran because I was scared." He swallowed hard, his eyes locking on hers. "But I can't live without you and Liam. Let me stay. Let me love you both." Her hands flew to her mouth, tears instantly burning her eyes. "Nathan," her voice wavered, almost lost in the patter of rain. "Are you sure? This isn't just pity? Or guilt?" "No," he said louder this time, his hands gripping hers as water dripped from his sleeves. "It's everything I should have said that night. I don't want to fix you. I can't lose you. Either of you." The door behind them creaked open. Small footsteps padded across the porch. "Mom?" Liam's voice was soft, sleepy. Then he saw Nathan kneeling in the rain. His eyes lit up, wide with wonder. "Uncle Nathan!" Liam darted forward before Grace could stop him, throwing his little arms around Nathan's neck with all the force his tiny body could muster. "Don't leave again. Tell me a superhero story." Nathan froze, stunned by the boy's grip, then laughed. A deep, warm sound he hadn't made in years. He wrapped his arms around Liam, holding him close, as if the world could try, but would never take him. Grace stood there, her hands trembling, the sight blurring through her tears. Nathan looked up at her, still kneeling, still holding Liam. "Grace," he said softly, "I'm done running." Her heart cracked wide open. She stepped forward, crouching beside them, pulling them both into her arms. Rain soaked through her sweater, but she didn't care. Nathan shifted, one arm sliding around her shoulders, the other keeping Liam close. For a long moment, they stayed like that, a family forged not by blood, but by choice, clinging to each other in the cold night. The rain poured harder, drumming on the roof, splashing against the concrete, but it felt like music. Nathan rose to his feet, still holding Liam with one arm, his other hand brushing Grace's cheek. She met his gaze, searching for any sign of doubt. But there was none. His eyes were clear, steady, full of something fierce and unwavering. He bent down, pressing his lips to hers, the kiss deep and desperate, years of pain melting into that single moment. Grace kissed him back, her arms tight around his neck, feeling the heat of him through the chill of the rain. Liam giggled in Nathan's arm, burying his face in his jacket, the sound like a spark of light cutting through years of darkness. When they finally pulled apart, Nathan's forehead rested against hers. "No more storms alone," he whispered. Grace smiled through her tears, touching his face gently. "Welcome home." Behind them, the apartment door swung wide, warm light spilling onto the wet porch. Together, they stepped inside, Nathan still holding Liam, Grace's hand locked in his, leaving the rain and the past behind them. Outside, the storm kept falling, but inside, a new beginning was already taking root. A man who had built walls around his heart, a woman who fought the world alone, and a little boy who believed in superheroes had just found their own. And for the first time in years, Nathan Cole laughed freely, holding on to the family he never thought he'd have. In life, it's easy to build walls around your heart after loss or betrayal. But true healing often begins when you let someone in. Nathan and Grace's story reminds us that strength isn't about doing everything alone. It's about having the courage to lean on others and protect what truly matters. Even in the toughest storms, compassion and connection can turn strangers into family. No matter your age or stage in life, never underestimate the power of love, trust, and second chances. What about you? Have you ever let someone in when you were scared? Share your story in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring journeys.